You always been an entrepreneur?
That's from 17. Yeah. I left my parents' home at 17 years old. And I was working a regular job prior to that.
Okay.
But it was always in conjunction to what it is that I was gifted to do. So I was a church drummer, organist, choir director, taught voice. Mm-hmm. So that was my main thing.
Okay.
And then I had to get a job on the side just so my daddy won't feel like I'm being lazy. You know, and have a regular job. So I worked at Hardee's, Arby's, Shoe Show, manager there, hotel, worked all these different places.
Yeah.
But when I left at 17 years old, I just focused on what it is I could do. And at that time was be a church musician and train the choirs. And then I got into preaching and then started pastoring. So
you like traditional pastor?
Yeah, traditional pastor for 20 years. I stopped that in 2017.
So like, on the circuit pastor.
Yeah, and preaching and books and preaching that country, that state. I mean, that was what I did. Itinerant minister. And then had been a pastor of one main church. But there were other churches that I had to fly to and preach at, you know, that was in my organization. Yeah.
So what was that? So hanging out with Larry Reid. So what was... Like, that's a totally different, like, from, like, the Larry Reid who would be like, if you frucking, you know, to this guy. So was your father a pastor? Was mama a pastor? Like, I wanted to really kind of know, like, Larry Reid.
My parents are pastors, but when I was coming up, they weren't. It was just my mama singing with her sisters, a female quartet group out of North Carolina called the Fleming Sisters.
Okay.
And so that's what they done all my growing up. Yeah. And then my father, later on, he got saved. And then he started preaching and pastoring. You know, so I saw all of that range happen as relates to my parents. And that's how I was raised. And then all of her sisters, they speak in tongues, prophesy. That's where I come from. But then my daddy's side, the brothers, you know, they're a little different.
Yeah, they're a little different.
They're a whole lot different. But my mama's side, the spiritual side, but I was raised in that my entire life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're in this thing and you're doing your thing. Were you profitable in it? Or were you like a storefront dude who just wasn't really necessarily getting...
Started out. Storefront.
Okay. And no disrespect to nobody who started the storefront. But after 20 years, you know, like sometimes you want to expand your brand.
Yeah, there ain't nothing wrong with starting out or being storefront. Right. I mean, there's a ministry in that too, but I knew I was called to more. Yeah. And so that's how it started. Okay. But when I switched from traditional pastoring, the church was doing very well. Yeah. But I just knew that I was called to do something else. Heard the Spirit say, move to Atlanta. That was in 2015, which made no sense. Don't like the heat. Don't like the South. I was not foreseeing what happened. Yeah. I just knew what I heard was to move to Atlanta and get into the entertainment industry.
So is that like an audible voice or is just like something on the inside? Well, like, so here's the thing. Like, I understand the voice, but I want to make sure that they understand it. So even when, I was Pretty Willie and I'm doing these shows and one night I'm just got off the House of Blues, DJ Quick opened up for him, game there. I look down, it's this little 15-year-old dude that just came out. He was in a Rolls Royce and I said, hey, Chris. And it just so happened to be Chris Brown because he was a kid. And I just remember the voice saying, your way or my way. And it was like a shocker to me. So what was the voice like for you that kind of told you? Because things seemingly are doing good.
Well, you know, I'm used to hearing the voice of the Lord. So at that particular time, it was his voice. If I will break it down, if anybody was like, I don't know if this voice is the Lord or what. For me, in the beginning, the voice of the Lord sounded like the authorities in my life that represented God. So when I first began to hear the voice of the Lord, it would sound like mom, sound like dad, sound like my Bishop L.L. Stevenson. It would sound like Reverend Odell Fox, my mom and them pastor I would listen to growing up. It sounded like them. Then as time went along, it began to sound like a very adult me. Like somebody, like I had grown up and became very elevated and that voice was speaking to me from the future and telling me what was the will of God. So that still is typically the voice that I hear, but then sometimes it is totally different than anything I could imagine. But in that moment, it sounded like me from the future that was saying, you need to get your ass up and go and move to Atlanta right now because you're about to come to the peak where you at and you got to grow some more.
Jeez.
Yeah, that was in 2015, June. In August, I was in Atlanta, August the 27th, 2015.